Richard Braine, the leader of the UK Independence Party, on my show for the first time. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Lembit. Good morning, Ben. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello.
Thanks very much for joining us. You've heard what Ben Shaplard has said. He says that there's a groundswell of support moving away from Brexit. How dare you try to stop us from staying in?
Well, it's interesting. I think Ashcroft's polling suggests that there certainly are people who've moved from a leave to remain view, but his polling also shows that probably twice as many people have moved from a remain to a leave view. So I think that really generally there has been a shift towards leave, partly many people in this country who understand the real benefits of democracy are pretty disgusted by what they see from, for instance, the Lib Dems, and of course from the European Union and the way it's treated us over the last 3.5 years. And so I think that that's absolutely wrong. The real groundswell has been a move towards leave, and recent polls show that as many as probably 60% now want us to leave the EU.
But all the polling suggests that actually, if there was a referendum, that Remain would lead ahead of leave.
I think you've just been polling Lib Dem members. That's not what I see.
No. I think actually you'll find that Remain has been ahead in every single poll since the referendum back in 2016.
Are you sure about that, Ben?
Don't forget that Remain was ahead in the polls exactly before the referendum itself, and the fortnight before the referendum itself. So I don't set much store by that. We had a big poll. It's called the referendum. It was the biggest vote. 17 million people voted, which was more than have ever voted for anything in the history of this country.
That's not true. 1992 general election was bigger.
No, it wasn't.
It was.
Sorry. Let me just get this absolutely clear. There has never been a vote in this country when as many as 17,410,472 people have voted for one thing. It's the largest number of people that have ever voted for anything.
Okay, but when people voted back in 2016, they voted to leave, but we weren't told what leave looked like, whether it was a soft Brexit, a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit. So we feel, as Liberal Democrats, that actually the people should have the final say on the final deal and see and compare what they've currently got from the EU and what they're going to get and make an informed decision on it.
Well, David Cameron was interviewed by Faiz al-Islam a week before the referendum, if you recall. And during that interview, which was about, I think, 45 minutes to an hour long, he said 28 times during that one interview, because he wanted to make sure that even the Liberal Democrats understood what voting leave really meant. And he said, voting to leave means that we will leave the single market and the customs union. And 28 times was absolutely knocking it into everyone's heads. So I don't agree with you. We knew what we were voting for. We were voting to leave the European Union, and that includes the institutions which constitute it. And we voted to leave them.
Okay, so how do you feel about having a referendum to confirm that decision to leave?
Well, I think you'll lose if we did have one, but I also think that it's completely unnecessary. It'll be a huge waste of public money. It will actually stir things up even more. And I'm really worried that we'll see the government actually make the vote less fair than it was before. For instance, by allowing 16-year-olds to vote, for instance, by allowing European Union citizens to vote. And I think there's many ways. I would say I'd be very nervous of that second referendum actually being done fairly. Remember what happened in Ireland. Remember what happened in France, 2005. 55% voted against the European Union Constitution. And then 2 years later, they were forced to ratify the Treaty of Lisbon, which is a 99% identical text. So we've seen what happens when you have proper popular votes against the European Union. They get steamrollered. And I don't want to see that happen in this country, because the whole basis of the European Union Constitution is that it moves in one direction even when the peoples of Europe vote against it. And that's not democracy. The actual constitution of the European Union is based on the destruction of democracy in that way.
Richard, as well as you and Liberal Democrat Ben Shaplard, we have a human in the studio, Penny Williams. Penny, what do you make of what you're hearing from the politicians?
Well, I find it very difficult as a human being, figuring out from day to day whether I want to leave or stay. I just Googled 1992, and it looks like there were 31 million people voted, which is more than, as you said.
Mm-hmm. But not more than the total number who participated in the referendum, as Richard Braine said.
Sorry, can I just clarify what I said? The number of people who voted Leave is the highest number that have ever voted for anything in the history of this country. In other words, the 1992 vote for the Conservatives was actually less than 17,410,742.
Yeah, it was 14.
So it is a technical point of psephology. There have been votes where more people turned out, but there's never been a case of more people voting for one thing.
Well, as a human being, I just think, as I said, we just need to get on with it. We are messing our country by just dragging it on.
So, Penny, you're one of those people that Richard Braine would say forms the majority of changes. You voted Remain, but you'd now say we should leave.
Yes. And,
Ben, you're saying that you just don't believe that Penny represents the majority of changes.
No, Penny represents her view. I'm just going on what people tell me on the doorstep in Tunbridge Wells. I mean, we've literally knocked on hundreds of doors yesterday, and 20% of the 2016 leavers told us they changed their mind. And a lot of them do support a people's vote to confirm that 2016 decision.
I've got a fairly challenging question for Richard in a minute, but let me start with you, Ben. If you're so sure about this, then why don't you just use this almost inevitable general election as the referendum? Because if you're right, then loads and loads of people will vote for the Lib Dems, which is clearly the most pro-Remain party in the country.
Well, I think all parties will make a case at the next general election that the election is about Brexit.
So why don't you simply say you don't need a referendum, because the public will elect a government, the texture of that government and the polling on that day will tell us whether Richard Braine is right, whether you're right, Ben.
That's right, and that's why Joe Swinson's policy is, our leader, is that should the Liberal Democrats win a majority government at the next general election, we would not go back to Brussels and renegotiate a deal. We would revoke Article 50, which means we would cancel Brexit and get on with the things that need dealing with, like the NHS, schools, adult social care, and so on.
Great, so you have actually, and Joe Swinson, your leader, has written the referendum out of the script, because you've just said to me that you'll treat a forthcoming general election as that referendum. Yes?
No, because if
we can't have it both ways.
If we don't win a general election and form a majority Liberal Democrat government,
then you've lost the referendum.
We will campaign for a people's vote on the final deal. The process started with the people, and they must end the process by confirming it in exactly the same way that the Good Friday Agreement had to be ratified by the people of Northern Ireland.
Completely different example, but I was actually involved in that. If you want to have that conversation, maybe we can go down that path.
It was still ratified by the people.
It was ratified by the people. It was yes, no, and they didn't have it again. They had one choice. They had one option on that. They didn't go back to it.
Yes, but they knew what the deal was. When people voted in 2016, they didn't know what Brexit looked like.
Richard, people were too stupid.
I'm not saying that.
I don't think that's right at all. And by the way, I think God bless Penny for changing her mind, because I think that people in this country were put people were very, very manipulated and bullied by the institutions and by government in 2016 during the referendum. And I met many people who were very worried about Project Fear. They were worried about the economy. They needn't have been. And they discovered after the referendum result that the doom and gloom and disaster hasn't happened, and that it's probably not going to happen. And I think there's lots of people like Penny who realise that they are being lied to and manipulated by the press and by the media and by our establishment in order to get the result that our establishment wants, because they're all doing very well out of all this, thank you very much. And so that's it. But one thing I would point out about the 2017 general election is that the Liberal Democrats did stand on a platform of saying that we will remain in 2017, and their vote actually fell. Although they got more seats in 2017 than 2015, the number of people who voted for them fell, and they were out there saying we're going to cancel the referendum. But the other interesting thing, of course, in 2017 is that 85% of people voted for parties whose manifestos stated very clearly and boldly, we're going to leave. And that was very exciting. And I genuinely hoped that general election was going to produce the result that the manifestos promised and suggested would happen. Sadly, it didn't. And it shows that the parties who promises in their manifestos don't carry them through. Perhaps Perhaps the Lib Dems will actually not cancel Brexit if they're elected, but God forbid that they're elected is all I can say.
In 2017, Richard, Theresa May lost her majority after setting out a hard Brexit stall. The country rejected a hard Brexit, and now we're facing a no-deal Brexit.
And you got 7%, Ben. You're the only totally pro-Remain party in this country. Got 7%. That's the point Richard Braine's making.
In 2017, you're absolutely right. The reason why is that the people I spoke to during the 2017 general election told me that they were voting Labour because they thought that Labour under Jeremy Corbyn was going to stop Brexit. And I agree with Richard. I agree with Richard. That's not what it said in the Labour manifesto, but that was a perception on the doorstep that why people voted Labour. And yesterday, the other trend that I picked up yesterday is that Labour vote in Tunbridge Wells has disintegrated.
Well, you're saying that you're hardly an objective. I've done canvassing. If I believed everything I was told on the doorstep, I'd have got 85% of the vote instead of losing my seat. But I'm not going to go through that this time. Okay. I'm allowed to say that. You're not allowed to laugh at that, Richard.
Did Montgomeryshire
heartless?
Did Montgomeryshire eventually make a decision to boot you out in 2010?
You know what? I wasn't. Yes, they did. They did decide to get rid of me. And because of that, I'm going to read you a message, which I wasn't going to read out. Richard will love this one.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, thank you, Richard. I've got one vote, yeah. Bit late, but thanks anyway. Ian in Rochester says this, Ben, and you've just provoked me into reading this. My husband and I voted to... Jan from Rochester. My husband and I voted to remain, but we're so disgusted by the European Union attitude and bullying, we would now vote to leave. There you go, Jan from Rochester, backing up with Penny, the human, and I know not Ian. It's just I don't have my glasses on. Penny, the human, and Richard, the party leader of UKIP, are both saying. I mean, it's a sample of two people so far that sent message in. Both saying that there's a shift away from Remain.
I think the idea that the European Union have bullied us, I can't agree with. The point is that we are in a position of...
You're too frightened to disagree with that, are you?
No, we're in a position of weakness. You know, the European Union is 550 million people, the UK is 65 million. There's an imbalance. Penny, to use an analogy, it's like we're in Namibia and we're competing against New Zealand. We're not at the same position. You know,
Namibia.
And then
I think you're referring to the rugby.
We're referring to the Rugby World Cup. And then
he's trying to win me over. You see, he's identified what I'm interested in and tried to make the analogy.
It hasn't worked.
Right. And also, we're in a position where, you know, there is a minority government since 2017. So we're not in that even, you know, we would have been in a stronger position to negotiate with the European Union had there been a government with a large majority that was united behind the Prime Minister to go and negotiate in Brussels.
Don't go, Richard. We've heard Ben trying to... Go on, Richard.
Let's remember that the Labour manifesto... And by the way, don't forget that there were some very good and prominent Labour leavers like Gisela Stewart and Kate Hoey, Frank Field and so on. Some great Labour people, loyal and good Labour politicians who were for leaving the EU. And so when Labour produced this manifesto in 2017 saying we're going to leave properly, and it did say that, I think people believed it. And you may be seeing a drop in the Labour vote down in Tunbridge right now because there are so many disenchanted Labour voters who realise now that the 2017 manifesto was a lie. And I know that there's a lot of Labour voters who voted to leave and feel absolutely betrayed, just as many of the rest of us do, about what's been going on in our Parliament for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Can I ask you a genuine question about how will you work at the next general election as UKIP with the Brexit Party, because you're very similar and a lot of Brexiteers have gone. How will that work from your point of view?
Our plan is to try to ensure that there are as many real Leave supporters in our Parliament as possible. So we're going to approach this coming general election a little bit tactically. And we are going to, because there are many good MPs who recognise, democracy and realise that we have voted against this sort of imperialist superstate, and they haven't been heard. They've had a tough time in Parliament, and all we need is more of them. One of the difficulties is we've got a sort of 80% Remainer Parliament that's more or less at odds with the people of this country, and so the trick is to now get more and more real Leave supporters into our parliament so that we can actually make some progress and do what the people have voted for.
I've got a few questions for you here as well, Richard. It's really about your conference. I understand that you didn't go to the conference due to, and I think I'm quoting you, low ticket sales, and you actually called for the event to be cancelled. That wasn't a vote of confidence in your own party, was it? No disrespect.
No. To be fair, that is spinning it one way. The reason ticket sales were low was because my predecessor, Gerard Batten, did a very good job for the party, and he was very popular. And he was in two minds about standing for another term as leader, but he did decide to. And then the NEC of the party decided to stop him doing that for various reasons, and they had a vote on it, and he was stopped. And many UKIP supporters were angry about that. And that spat, I'm afraid, has continued, and many UKIP supporters did actually boycott the conference because they're unhappy that Gerard Batten is still being left out in the cold. He's a great man, Gerard, and we owe him a great debt of gratitude in the party. He's done 27 years. He's struggled for the party. Don't forget, UKIP's been fighting to leave the European Union for 27 years, which has been a Herculean struggle, and we're still fighting for it. So Gerard deserves our respect, and that's why people boycotted the conference. And in the end, I decided to join them because I felt that the decision was wrong. I support Gerard. He's a good man, and he shouldn't be left out in the cold and held as someone not in good repute in the party.
But finally, it's quite easy to spin a situation where the leader of a party doesn't turn up for the party.
Well, I mean, that may be the case. To be honest, it's not a big issue for the party going forward. You know, what matters is we've got a great manifesto. We get out there and speak to people, and we knock on doors, and we try to grow our vote share. And don't forget, we have achieved this extraordinary thing that we've achieved, not by winning a general election, but by putting pressure on the other parties to actually look carefully at our policies and understand why we're becoming more popular. So that's our goal, is to go on setting the agenda for British politics, which is undoubtedly, I mean, over the last 3.5 years, nobody has talked about anything else except the UKIP policy, Brexit. And there's even political parties naming themselves after UKIP policies. And we've got lots more policies. UKIP is a party full of independent thinkers who think about everything and come up with solutions. And that's why our manifesto is great. And that's why people should keep looking at us.
All I can say is I'm sure that if you have a Christmas party this year, your guests hope that you'll remain rather than leave. If you're not in when they come round, they won't be too happy about that.
I won't be boycotting. I won't be boycotting anymore. It was just a one-off occasion when, in fact, I realised that I was in solidarity with a large number of members who are unhappy about a decision that's been taken internally in the party.
Great to have you on. Thank you, Richard. It's Richard Braine, the current leader of UKIP. What do you make of what he said? Very kind of him to spend his Sunday with my panel.